The car maker Stellantis has warned British car plants will close with hundreds of thousands of job losses unless Brexit is renegotiated. The UK firm says it could face tariffs on exports to the European Union from next year when tougher post-Brexit rules take effect. The British government says it's in talks with the EU to try to find a solution. Stellantis is the world's #3 car maker by sales and owner of 14 car brands, including Vauxhall, Peugeot and Citroën. Well, let's talk to David Bailey, a Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School. David, in simple terms, what's the story here? What's the problem?
So, as part of the trading cooperation agreement between the UK and the EU, tariffs are avoided as long as local content rules are complied with. So you need a certain amount of content in stuff that's made and traded to qualify. Now, usually that's 55%. There was a special agreement negotiated at the last minute for electric vehicles, recognising that lots of stuff going into electric cars, battery components, raw materials, comes from Asia, including China. So the local content figure was set much lower, about 40% for the electric vehicle and 30% for batteries. That tightens up, though, from the beginning of next year. It gets much tougher. And from the beginning of 2027, the battery has to be made in the EU or the UK. Now, if car makers can't meet those targets of more local content, they will have to pay tariffs when the car is traded between the UK and the EU. That's the essence of the problem. Car makers can't meet the tight rules that are coming in.
So what's the fix? What has to happen? UK government has to bend these rules or what?
Well, the UK government can't do it unilaterally. Remember, this was an agreement between the UK and the EU. We both signed up for this. And in fact, the UK sold this as a big win. It said there's more flexibility in the short term for electric vehicles. So either there's an agreement, a renegotiation between the UK and the EU that gives a more gradual transition period, recognising that more content is coming from Asia and recognises the fact that battery supply isn't coming on stream quick enough in Europe and that there's been a spike in raw material prices. Now, either that happens or car makers have to pay 10% tariffs and electric vehicles are going to become more expensive.
Is this more about the UK's failure to grow electric vehicle battery manufacturing than Brexit trade rules?
It's a bit of both. That's a good question. So Brexit trade rules don't help. They add extra costs and complexity. They're difficult to comply with. On top of that, the UK has no real industrial policy to encourage big investment in these battery gigaplants in the UK. There's only one actually planned in the UK, up at Sunderland for Nissan by Envision, part Chinese company. About 40 being planned in the EU. But remember as well, massive investment in the US through the Inflation Reduction Act, encouraging investment in green technologies. $80 billion of investment has gone in there, including in making car batteries. So the US doing a great deal, the EU also going for industrial policy and backing battery making in a big way, as is China. The UK largely standing on the sidelines watching, now wondering if it's going to be able to hang on to its car industry.
So is this about cap in hand asking for public money? I mean, when you read these headlines about 800,000 job losses, I mean, can that really be accurate, or is this a case of a private company asking for enormous amounts of public taxpayers' money? Let's be fair.
So that 800,000 figure is a total number of jobs in the UK car industry. Nobody's saying they're all going to disappear. What Stellantis is saying, unless these rules are changed, it may look at the viability of its operations in the UK because they'll be at a competitive disadvantage. They won't be able to cope with 10% tariffs. So Stellantis aren't actually asking for any extra cash. They simply want more time to comply with the rules. There is a separate point, I think, about the fact that we need a much more active industrial policy to support battery making. That is going to require some serious cash. So far, the UK government hasn't said it will do that, although the Chancellor of the Exchequer said he'll wait and see what the EU will do before he responds. That's a bit late. The fear is that that may be a bit too late and a bit too little, as it were, kind of late in the day.
Stellantis is obviously a major global manufacturer. Are we going to be back here talking about other big names in a couple of weeks, or is it just a Stellantis problem?
No, I think it's an industry-wide problem. The European industry as a whole have been complaining about this since last year. So we're already kind of 6 months into them saying, look, we aren't going to be able to meet these rules. And, it's mainly a UK problem, but it also affects EU manufacturing. I think there is the potential for an agreement here if both sides can get together. Mike Hawes at the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders has talked about, let's hope common sense prevails. So I think there is scope for a deal and a relaxation of these rules. One of the issues, though, is who's going to ask for it first. Is it the UK or is it the EU? Whoever asks for it first, the other side will want some kind of quid pro quo, as it were. So, there's got to be some way of getting a deal done to relax these rules. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the very ironic situation that electric cars traded between the UK and the EU face a 10% tariff, whereas petrol cars won't. Doesn't make much sense.
Stellantis says that we need to reinforce the competitiveness of the UK by obviously establishing a battery production centre or more battery production capacity in the UK. I mean, how quick is that? How do we do that?
The UK is barely off the starting line in that race. So there's been one planned investment up at Sunderland by Envision with Nissan. British Volt has fallen through. There's been no investment in the Midlands. The next big decision that's coming is by Tata, the Indian owner of Jaguar Land Rover, which is looking to build a battery gigafactory somewhere in Europe. And it's thought they're choosing between the UK and Spain. That is going to require substantial government support in the UK to make it happen. But even if the government offers that, there's a really big problem in the UK in that energy prices are too high. That puts off battery investors because making batteries is an energy-intensive business. So you've got a combination of Brexit rules, the lack of an industrial policy, and high energy prices all combining together to make the outlook for kind of UK battery making pretty grim at the moment.
David, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the programme. David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School.